Well, as you can probably work out, here we are again at the airport in none other than the city of Warsaw, and at this time going to routinely on my sixth in this employment. As obviously I've been before, I was employed with Baker Tilly in Russia. I was already going to Russia a number of occasions, but this is the sixth journey into Russia with this new phase of life. And I was just thinking, it's quite funny, the other day I was just wondering, I was thinking to myself, how many times have I flown in my life? And it's somewhere between, I can't really work it out exactly, but for example, even in the last 4.5 years, I think, you could say that in the year through to, and I'm thinking of it in terms of end of May to end of May, that kind of thing, or from beginning of May round to beginning of May, because that's when I started with Baker Tilly in Poland. First year I went to the Czech Republic about every week, so that was 2 flights per week. That would be 100 flights during the course of that year. I'm not talking about the other ones that I did as well. Some of them, sometimes I went obviously with something other than an aeroplane. Maybe I drove a couple of times and took the train a couple of times. But let's say that there was about, between the beginning of May and the end of June of that year, perhaps 100 flights, and probably coming down, so that the last of the 4 years that I did there, again a cycle from half year to half year, I probably went about, on average about once a month or so, somewhere. So you could say that was like 25 flights, and maybe you could take it down gradually over the course of that time, so that you would say 75, and then 50, and then 25. So that's 250 flights over the course of the last 4 years, plus already with this time, like I say, well, obviously I've had more than flights to just Russia, but there was 10 there and back. Of course, you always consider there and back. So there was another 10 there. Maybe you could consider also breaking. I'm not even considering the ones where it was broken down into several segments. But I know for a fact that, for example, I'm getting on for about 30 segments in this calendar year. We're now in November. So that's just with LOT, regardless of Czech Airlines and other airlines. So if you put it all together, I suppose I've had about 260 there. Another, maybe if you take it back the 6 years that I worked with Adam in what was the Strategia Grupa Strategia, I suppose over those 6 years I probably did another couple of hundred, I don't know, maybe less, it was rather less, so maybe it was 100 over those 6 years. So maybe that gets to about 360, and previous to that doing all manner of other things, probably getting on for, well, maybe 450, maybe 500, somewhere between 450 and 500 flights in my life. And so far I never actually got bumped. I was just thinking the other day, so far never got bumped. In over 450, definitely over 450 flights in my life, never once got bumped. In fact, there's only one time that I went to the airport, failed to get on a flight and had to come back again because of lateness, and that was because we didn't know that the flights were changed because of the different program. The travel agent didn't tell us that there'd been a change in flight schedule since we bought the tickets, and therefore we turned up late, but without it being our fault. It was all on the travel agent. We got recompense for that. That was going home from the Dominican Republic just before the time when I was filming. That's about the last thing I went on that wasn't filmed. In fact, there were just a couple of my earliest films were just snatches of things that happened at the Dominican Republic, like for example when the bride throws the bouquet. I was actually at the Dominican Republic. It's one of my first ever films on this channel. So it's just the point before, that was the November before I started filming in 2006 in February. So it was the end of 2005. That was the time when I last failed to get on an aircraft, other than when atmospheric conditions or the lack of the plane coming to the airport has bumped the whole flight, and I've known about it before I haven't even turned up at the airport, or I've turned up at the airport, found that the flight is cancelled, gone home, gone on a plane to Prague. That happened once. But bumping per se is something that I've heard about happening as a regular occurrence in the United States. People saying, oh, I got bumped here, I got bumped there. And I was thinking, well, you know, have I just been lucky? I have never been bumped, even though I'm, you know, somebody that's been on 450 plus flights. Well, today, as you can imagine, I've got something new to show you, and that is namely the seat is empty. The seat is empty, even though it's not because I'm travelling with. It's a normal lot ticket. Doesn't have empty seats normally. The reason why the seat is empty is that I'm on a waiting list. So here we are. I'm here on a waiting list, even though this was bought some time ago. What I probably ought to have done and ought to do in the future, although it's not possible coming back, apparently from Moscow to Warsaw, but what is apparently, and the funny thing is there's hardly anybody here, so it's not that they turned up today, it's just they've all done it online probably, and they've got printers. I'll have to invest in a printer and do the thing online, a check-in, so that I'm an early checker-inner, and put some alarm in my phone to make me check in exactly 24 hours before departure and print it out. That's probably what I'm going to have to do for the future, because this is kind of crazy, and I can't work with him. I can't work with not knowing that I'm going to be there. I mean, the next day they said, okay, you'll get a seat on the next one, which is 3 hours later. Well, 3 hours later sticks me in Moscow. After 2 hours, it's 19:35. That gives me Moscow at 21:35, which in Moscow time now, because of the difference in change, will be 12:35, half past midnight. It takes about an hour and a half. It'll be 2 o'clock in the morning when I get home instead of 11 o'clock as it usually is. Just getting in before 11 o'clock, so that's hardly acceptable. I can't go to the shop and get water, get food or anything. For those who don't have their own flat in Warsaw, in Moscow, I suppose it's even harder. They're turning up at hotels ridiculously late, there's no food for them, etc. That's really not acceptable. So apparently if I do get bumped, there apparently is some kind of compensation. The woman at the gates talked about pieniążki. Don't know how much they would be. Or I have the chance to upgrade to first class. Well, I don't know how much that costs, of course. There's always a possibility that might be more amenable than mucking about with having a taxi at the other end, rather than worrying about whether the Aero Express is still running. That having been said, I have to stop now and just research whether the Aero Express is running or not at that hour. If I do have to get on because that's all part of the decision criterion, I think. So there we are. That's the diary so far, and I'll keep you updated as things progress.
Вы видите, там задержка на одной человек нельзя. Хорошо, проверить, мы второй проверять. В данный момент. Специально давайте нет. Там вставлять нельзя, потому что водитель будет. Хорошо, в третьем снять. Пишут, а потом вы видите, у нас было забито, что не проверили. Хорошо. На кому не пройти? Даже написано, что у каждого должен быть какое твое дело. Если уже остался, это его проблема. Просто уже привыкли так все делать, понимаете? Я понимаю, но вот человек выходит. Она осталась с билетом. А если он забирает билет, как он мне потом докажет, что он заберет? Мы едем вместе, нет, я вам не про это говорю. Я вам говорю, 4 поездки, вот даже мужчина человек. Он может всех подпустить, но он билет заберет, а все 4 будут...
Подождите, а вы сказали, что можно, так как я описал ситуацию. Она говорит, что нельзя.
На 4 поездки,
Следующее.
нет, если вы вдвоем, естественно, чтобы билет у оставшегося оставался.
Да я опять не понимаю, ладно.
потому что...
Конечно. Нет, ну по тройке тут...
Ну, потому что...
Объясняете всякую глупость.
я вам
Вот если он
объясняю.
останется без билета,
Ищите,
тогда вы его
почитайте
штрафуете.
правила,
Это вы
правила.
читаете правила. Ничего, ходите, сама испугалась и ушла.
Конечно, они на фото и все. Ну да, если семью очень не причинила. Какой твоей?